Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 12 of The Familiar of Zero. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So last we left off, things have hit the fan in a real big way. The Prince of Albion is dead, thus cutting off the royal line. Princess Henrietta's note was taken, and wards, a viscount and a captain of high standing in Tristane, has betrayed everyone. And really, only due to essentially Saito and a couple others, only due to their exploits was total disaster avoided, as it's recently sort of become clear that Louise isn't all she appears to be. You know, yeah, she doesn't have any magical talent, but there might be something else going on beneath the surface that has yet to really make itself clear. Boy, this is just really grim, hearing the princess just sort of thank Louise despite everything. Now, normally during the opening theme, I would sit quietly with reverence, but today I am obligated to my sponsor. Today's sponsor is none other than myself. You may not know this, but I write light novels, and I've written quite a few. Today, I'm going to tell you about the eccentric detective Yamamoto, in which the intrepid, if drunken, detective solves a wide variety of cases with the help of her assistant Satoshi. Ranging from finding missing pets and surveilling cheating spouses to catching a high-end cat burglar and preventing the murder of a local business magnate, no case is too big or too small for Detective Yamamoto. Even when she's forced to work with, and occasionally against, the police, and even when she must contend with her fear of the supernatural, nothing will prevent the eccentric detective from doing what needs to be done to solve the case. If this sounds like something you'd like to read, then by all means, consider purchasing books in the Eccentric Detective Yamamoto series by me, Frederick Fitzgerald, through Amazon. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the episode. Now, the big question in my mind is, after all of this, how does anyone possibly return to the status quo? Because, to some degree, I feel like that is what has to happen. Louise has to return to school, Saito has to return to being a pain in the fundament. However, with this whole business about Louise being a child of the void, and with Colbert advising with the headmaster, then, I don't know. I feel like there's more going on here. But, Colbert's also taking, not a leave of absence, but he's going off to explore a village. And, you know, lest we forget, this is a guy that, was fairly knowledgeable about the Staff of Destruction. And, oh, okay. He's investigating that legendary dragon. You know, he did mention that he, had retrieved some dragon's blood, which was, by Saito's reckoning, gasoline, so, you know, something tells me the dragon might in fact be a plane. You know, just a little hunch here, because, that is kind of a common thing when you get down to it, that people who don't know what planes are, when they see them, they think they're dragons, or some other such creature. I guess it makes sense that that's your only frame of reference. Oh dear. So Louise is broaching the topic of all that void stuff. And, man, I guess it's mighty convenient that she doesn't really have an idea of who said it, even though we know it to be wards, but, I guess I can understand why she is so, hesitant about this. You know, the idea being that void is the lost element, you know, this branch of magic that seemingly thought to be gone forever, but Louise might in fact carry it despite being essentially talentless in every other regard. I mean, there is ample evidence there, what with Saito being Gandalfer, as they claim. Oh dear. This strikes me as a bit of a change of pace for Louise, She had always been rather, cavalier about dressing in front of Saito, but now, after all that business with Wards, where Saito saved her and then, kissed her and all that, it seems like, he's not exactly just a familiar anymore, Like, if he was being treated as an animal, then, I guess Louise might start treating him like a person, if only barely. We can but hope. Oh dear. If they were about to have any, real conversation, that's gone now. I seem to recall that, this occurred, several episodes ago, that little elastic band snapped. And I seem to recall I was curious about whether or not, elastic did exist back then, but I guess it's kind of a moot point, seeing as how the consequences have happened and come to pass. Oh dear. I guess it's unfortunate that Louise has decided to favor the whip rather than understand that sometimes attrition happens during laundry. And, at least it happened in the privacy of her quarters, it's not like it happened in public or anything. Oh dear. So they're really going at it again, it's deeply unfortunate, and this really does seem to be the pattern where anytime things are going reasonably well, they invariably regress back to the mean, which is to say, they argue over something stupid. Now, if that weren't enough, Saito moping here, that's liable to attract the attention of Siesta. I guess case in point, here she is. So, it is interesting that a maid here would have vacation. I feel like that's, maybe not ahistoric, but I was given to understand that as, a peasant, she was essentially a serf, and that, she can't just, go and travel and stuff. But the interesting thing here is that she's from a semi-distant village, Colbert was going to visit a village, and Siesta's made it clear that her ancestor was kind of like Saito, who had all these claims about technology and stuff like that. So, maybe all this kind of ties together. Maybe Siesta's great-grandfather arrived on that metal dragon, Alright, so, another little hint here. The solar eclipse factors into all this, and that, the solar eclipse was what allows people in and out of this world, it seems, and that, if you miss the eclipse, then that's it. Now, yeah, I guess not to put too fine a point on it, but I think it's pretty clear at this point that they've got, a plane here, and probably quite an old one, too. I don't know if time in this world passes the same as it does in Earth, but if we're talking Siesta's great-grandfather, and this is roughly analogous to 2007 or whenever the Familiar Zero came out, then, the great-grandfather was probably around at the early 20th century with all the wars that went on back then. And, assuming that he was Japanese, Japan was pretty heavily industrialized back then, they got up to speed pretty quickly, and I do believe they would have had planes. There might be some historical things to quibble about just because it's not totally 100% accurate, but, I don't know. I think it holds up as much as it needs to for its purposes. So, unfortunately, Louise is now sort of coming to reckon with the consequences of her actions. She came to apologize to Saito, but, by all appearances, it's far too late. He's riding off with Siesta. And, her motive is sort of laudable in that she does want to apologize, but, one would think that after so many times of this sort of thing happening, she might as well just, skip the whole cycle and not overreact here. Although that said, learning what she has done about Saito and where he's headed to at Siesta, she's probably not liable to apologize much anymore, Although I suppose the one saving grace is that even if she hasn't put it together 100%, she recognizes the name of the village and that someone else was going there. So, hopefully she'll be more entranced with the big metal dragon that will inevitably end up being there, rather than the fact that Saito's like a dog in heat. Now, I do have to wonder, the peasants of the village of Talb have been guarding the dragon, essentially, but I feel like it's sort of even odds whether or not the plane would be in any, usable condition. Because on the one hand, Siesta's great-grandfather, he might have known something about maintaining it and would have passed down the information, but, it's sort of like a cargo cult, or, like the Adeptus Mechanicus in Warhammer 40,000. They do stuff, but they don't know why they do it. And they sort of misunderstand technology for something fantastical. So, the villagers of Talb might have this big ceremony they perform for the dragon, and it's really just like, polishing the metal or something like that. But, I don't know. I mean, I guess I would think that, sort of like medieval French peasants would be scared of the dragon, regardless of how dormant it apparently is. So at this point, I feel like Saito's probably got to have a pretty good idea about what the thing is. He's not sort of saying it out loud, but if you have a dragon that came from his world and people use it to fly, there's only so many things it could possibly be. And if you get down to it, in terms of aircraft, a plane's better than a helicopter, I would think. Although, it does raise the question of whether or not Saito's capable of piloting it. I mean, I think it's fair to assume that the answer is yes, given that it's been such a big sort of plot point in the background, but when you get down to it, the Gandalfur runes, they really only kick in regards to weapons. If it's just a normal plane, or a passenger plane or a Cessna or something like that probably wouldn't do it. So it's got to be a fighter plane or something. Or something with military applications, Ooh, that's an interesting little historical thing. So Cromwell has conquered Albion, and he says, the Tudor family is gone. I wonder if the Tudors were overthrown by the real-life Cromwell. I feel like the answer is no. I think the Tudors are the current ruling family of England. And I guess, to be fair, I don't know who Cromwell overthrew. I think it was Charles II, but I don't know much beyond that. Well, I don't know. Was that technically Victorian England? I think that predates Queen Victoria, so I don't know. I guess I don't have a huge grasp on the history of it being not my country, but... Now, interestingly enough, the dragon seems to have a guardian, and one who is more than willing to knock down stalactites onto them if need be. Oh, okay. Never mind, it was just Colbert, He's interested in the dragon, and understandably they all are too, and, Colbert's just trying to protect this priceless historical treasure. Now that's interesting. The way he describes the dragon as being a remnant, it sort of indicates to me that everyone assumes that the dragon's just dead, And I guess if you get down to it, if you're looking at a dormant plane that hasn't been run in however long, I think the natural conclusion would be that it is a dragon, that it is dead. Oh dear. So Louise and Saito are just butting heads again, They can't apologize to one another, and it's deeply unfortunate, because, really when you get down to it, this can all be fixed with a smooch. Now, the others are just sort of leaving them behind. Naturally, they want to see the plane, but this might be a good thing for them, a little bit of alone time. They're not going for it, but, sometimes you do need to hash things out, and much as I hate to say it as the viewing audience, sometimes you do need to yell at each other sometimes, just, let off steam, but I don't know, I feel like they do so much of that maybe they should just instead be sort of forthright rather than hostile. Sometimes they are the same thing, but given the pattern that has emerged between Louise and Saito, I feel like just being nice to one another would be a nice change of pace. Now, it is interesting that the plane apparently has a hangar for it, because I feel like the hangar certainly didn't predate the plane, and more to the point, it probably didn't come with it either, so it had to have been built, but I don't know what to make of that. I guess it's probably not something we should look too deep into. Now, the interesting thing here is that all these mysterious runes here that no one can decipher, it just so happens that, Saito can read it perfectly because it's Japanese. I do like that sort of thing. That's been like a minor plot point in Konosuba too, where like there's been Japanese runes that only Kazuma can read. But, yeah, well, that certainly looks like a plane to me. And I feel like, oh, is that a 0? Now that's interesting because, well, it's interesting for many reasons. It's rather unfortunate as far as Saito and Louise are concerned because, boy howdy, she's probably not going to like him calling it that. But, the 0, I believe, was, like the sort of like main fighter plane in World War II. Which, I'm not sure that jives with the timeline that's been established with Saito's great-grandfather, but, I don't know, maybe time behaves differently. It certainly would make sense, but, I guess the salient point about all of this is that Colbert is saying, hey, look, Saito, you can go home, because there's a solar eclipse coming up. And I feel like it's not really his place to say that, because, like, yes, it is true. Yes, Saito could have put 2 and 2 together here, but he's also essentially disenfranchising Louise of her familiar. And, lest we forget, he informed her that, like, should you attempt the summon familiar spell a second time, that's like a grave insult to everyone and the gods and all that, and you shouldn't do that. So, like, given what everyone in the background has sort of said about, like, familiars being lifelong partners to their mages, saying, like, hey, Saito, you can go home, like, tough luck, Louise, no more familiar for you, that seems like, that's just, like, a rather harsh thing to do. And, on the one hand, you can't blame Saito for wanting to go home, him having been involuntarily summoned to this world, but on the other hand, he does also have obligations, even if he is loath to fulfill them. So back with Princess Henrietta, it seems as though things are rather dire. Germania has withdrawn the marriage proposal, so, yeah, that's a political marriage that's been killed in the crib, which is, not good. At least the Archduchess is understanding to Princess Henrietta, but, I don't know, I feel like this merits a little bit of scolding, seeing as how the security of the country is now at risk. I mean, like, she's saying, like, look, let's accept this as fate, what happens, happens, but, I don't know, that's a pretty glib thing to say when, this is developing into an existential crisis for Tristane. Now, they've brought the 0 back to the academy, and one has to wonder, how did they do it? Like, surely it's not in, like, flying condition, right? Like, it looks good enough, but, I don't know. How'd they do it, I wonder? Like, I mean, Saito could have flown it, I suppose, but, yeah, okay, so it seems like really the plane was just like out of fuel. It doesn't have the things it needs to move, but Saito is well aware that, yeah, there is some gasoline now, and if you can synthesize more of it, then the plane can actually fly. And I hope he should know that for certain, given that, flying a plane is serious business. You can't just, hop in the cockpit and expect to, do it in one go. But beyond that, there's all sorts of mechanical systems and things that, really, I feel like there's a fairly small margin for error. Things have to be in good working condition, and I feel like a plane sitting for decades is probably not conducive to good operation if it hasn't also been maintained. Of course, that's not the only thing not being maintained. Louise and Saito, they don't seem like they've truly made up, and Louise is clearly distraught over this whole thing. And, how could she not, really? The past few episodes have been a veritable roller coaster for her. And really, it seems like things are not letting up, even in the slightest. Now, Geesh is not normally a super trustworthy individual, but he brings news that things have really hit the fan in Albion, and that Albion's declared war. So, yeah, it really does seem like it's kind of all hands on deck, because things are rocketing fanwards, and when you get down to it, Tristane wasn't in a great position to begin with. And, I don't know, maybe Albion's not as well off as they had been before, but given that Cromwell's conquered it and sort of consolidated power, I feel like, I don't know, the threat of him can't be discounted. And I guess when you get down to it, Tristane also seems like the weak link on the continent, as it were. Not that all the countries are, really chummy with one another, allied against Albion, but, yeah, I don't know. I feel like, if the other nations were shrewd, they might, let the chips fall where they may and then take on the winner, as it were. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.